Welcome back to FML Talk, all of my beautiful freaking people. I am so excited to share this guest and this episode with you today. It is a wild story. If you thought mine was a shit show, I mean, it doesn't even come close to what Tina Swithin has dealt with. She is an author, an advocate, and just an all-around really beautiful human being. And I am so excited for you to hear this crazy journey that she has been on. So sit back, grab a drink, and welcome to FML Talk.
Oh my God. Wait, how old was the other girl?
19. Can you believe that shit?
Hey, this is Gabrielle Stone.
Good book.
He did what? 48 hours?
What a dick.
Yeah, but have you seen all the photos on her Instagram? And this is FML Talk.
Oh, no, she didn't.
So we all know that I am no stranger to divorce, but thankfully I did not ever have to go to court for my divorce. I never had to go in, stand in front of a judge, plead any cases, go in and be in person with lawyers and sit across from my ex-narcissist. Unfortunately for Tina, that was so not the case. What this woman has endured, it just heartbreaking. And I'm so grateful that during my divorce, I never had to go in and have that anxiety that court brings and just all the bullshit drama and emotions that come with going through that process. She is not only the author of Divorcing a Narcissist series, but she's also a divorce consultant and a strategy partner and a family court advocate. She knows her way around a courtroom, and to see where her story began and how it ended up is just really incredible and shocking is like the best word that comes to mind. But what was so interesting about how all this happened, we were set to record and something had suddenly come up in my schedule that made us push back a week. And then during that week, something in her life that had been a long time coming and many, many years in the legal system coming finally happened on a national news level. And this was the first podcast that she sat down to record after that news broke and after her story finally, so rightfully so, got the completion that it deserved. So buckle up, you guys, because you think you're going to court to divorce a narcissist, and we end up in a whole fucking different shit show. It is wild. So without further ado, here is Tina. Tina Swithin, welcome to FML Talk. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here. I was listening to some of your podcasts and I'm like, why have our paths not crossed before this?
I agree.
And I want to be your friend.
Yay. Oh, I love that. So I'm so excited to dig into some of the stuff that I know you have gone through in your life, even quite recently. But why don't you take everybody back and kind of give us just a little overview on what you do and your story?
Sure. So back in 2008, I was married. I had 2 little girls. I lived in an amazing home, gated community, fancy cars, really actively involved in my business community. I was a business owner, and my whole world came crashing down. I found out that my husband at the time had a major spending addiction. I know that yours, it was infidelity. Mine was infidelity of a different type to the tune of $1.6 million. We were in debt.
Ooh, wow.
So IRS comes in. Basically, he had this entire life that I didn't know about. And so everything crashed. And I found myself sitting on a therapist's couch trying to understand my life, what was happening. I'm a fixer, so I wanted to know, how do I fix this? And she walked across the room, brought back the DSM-5 and said, can't diagnose him, but this is not fixable. He sounds very much like a narcissist. I read the description. Naively, was very optimistic and excited that if I had a label for it, now what do we do? How do we solve this? And she basically said, pack your stuff and go, or accept that this is your life. And man, what a bomb on top of everything else. And I lasted probably about 8 months after that, trying to make things work, going to marital therapy, counseling. And next thing I know, I'm basically penniless. I had $200 to my name. Women had to drive my daughters to the women's shelter where I had volunteered for many years. And a couple of the darkest days of my entire life. What I didn't realize that, as hard as it is being married to a narcissist, going up against them in family court, especially with children, is conflict that I did not even know existed. And I quickly discovered that the court system is very ill-equipped to, parental rights carry more weight than a child's right to be safe. Because of the financial abuse I had suffered, I had to represent myself up against him and his attorneys, multiple different attorneys over the years. And it completely turned my life upside down. I lost my home, my cars. I was walking into car dealerships. I cringe to think back. I was walking into car dealerships, and because I knew a lot of the owners or managers, and I was basically asking them, just give me a car and here's my wedding ring. Can we just trade? I don't even care what you give me. I was so desperate, and went from having nannies to having to go to food pantries to feed my kids. Because, what we know about narcissists, a lot of it is about control. And so, and winning and hurting you. And when I made the decision to leave the relationship, that was a huge blow to his ego. And so it started out quite a journey. It was about 2 years into my battle that, I just felt like I was in the twilight zone in the family court system. That logic is we protect kids, and you truly feel like you've fallen down a rabbit hole, and you're Alice in Wonderland, and you're looking around going, none of this makes sense. It's illogical.
Yeah. And, so this is, first of all, let's start with the fact that the IRS shows up and you find out that you're over $1 million in debt. What was that money being spent on?
So we owned businesses together, and I thought our businesses were very successful, but he was supporting a lifestyle that we could not afford. We had a very nice home and a lot of things. He came home, it felt like once a month with a brand new luxury car, and kept me out of everything. So I really just thought we were doing really, really well. That's not how I grew up. I grew up with a single dad. He was a blue collar worker. And so this was a whole new world to me. And whenever I would challenge him on finances, he would just say, this is not a world you're accustomed to. And, and he would make me think he was smarter than me. And I just had to turn everything over to him. So I just trusted, but what he was actually doing was moving money around to pay bills. He would take out a loan that I didn't know about and then refinance the house. Everything was in his name. You know, even our home, while we were married, when he bought it as a single man. So I truly had nothing.
Nothing. Wow. Oh my God. To find out that your entire life is going to so drastically change from what you've, become accustomed to, especially with your two daughters. That in itself is like the floor getting pulled out from under you. To then have to go and take yourself to court and represent yourself in, what is a long drawn out legal process. People that message me all the time saying like, you're so smart for leaving and it's so good that you got out. I didn't have to have kids to think about, you know what I mean? Which is, I thank God for, because I would never want to be tied to my ex-husband in that way. But it's a whole nother thing when you're trying to get away from a narcissist that you have children with and children to think about. So when you got to court, what was that process like for you to have to do that by yourself?
Terrifying, because if you're mad at me, I will stay awake tonight thinking about it. It will consume me because I hate conflict. And so to be thrust into the court system becomes their platform for abuse. And the abuse I suffered during the marriage was nothing compared to this new avenue of abuse that he had found. And I was so naive to think, he's never participated in the kids' lives. He's never changed a diaper. I've handled everything. In my marriage, my co-parent was our nanny. I would have never asked him to take care of the girls if I had something to do. It would have never occurred to me as an option, because unless there was a camera on or we were in public, he had nothing. He wanted nothing to do with parenting. And because parenting can be selfless and tedious and all of those things. And he was above that. So I was naive to think that I would just get the kids. Why would he fight for the kids when he had never even made them a meal or changed a diaper? But what I quickly found out is that it's all about hurting you. And he knew that the number one way to hurt me was my daughters. And so he fought. He didn't just fight for 50-50 custody. He wanted to take my daughters from me completely because he knew that was the ultimate pain that he could inflict on me.
And what grounds did he have when you guys went to court? What was he saying that he thought justified taking the kids 100% of the time?
In the beginning, it started with him wanting 50-50. And then, I was saying it's not even realistic. He travels, he lives 4 hours away. He had just moved up to the Bay Area. And how does somebody have 50-50 custody from 4 hours away? And so it started out with he wanted joint. And then when I fought him on that and the court started to see through him and didn't give him 50%, then it became all out war. And he really never had any grounds for trying to remove custody. There is nothing he's been ever been able to say about me as a mom, as a person. But I feel that his need to win overrode logic to where there were times where he would keep the mask on super tight. And then other times where his need to hurt me was so extreme that logic was right out the window. And I remember watching him in court, and I'm so good at reading people and, paying attention to social cues. And I remember watching the judge at several points and just looking at him and going, stop talking, like you're making the judge mad. But then I'd go, well, no, let him, let him. Right. But it was that fixer in me going, wanting to make everything better. It was just, and so his mom became, I think she's a really unhealthy person in the family. And I find that when I help a lot of women in this category, there's usually a lot of dysfunction within the family, an enabling mother. And I think it really became about pleasing her and wanting to take the girls so that his mom could raise my daughters. So it went on. 2012, we were in court 13 times just that year alone. It was, my God. I was working full-time mom, and then trying to protect my kids in court. And
I definitely identify with, my ex-husband 100% had an enabling mother. So I think that is a common thread that a lot of people see in narcissists, that it comes from somewhere. It didn't just be bred out of nothing. When you were in court with him, where were your daughters at the time?
Preschool, school during the day.
But were they going back and forth between the two households?
So it started out at about, I would say 80-20 was our custody split. And it was a red flag to the court that I filed from the women's shelter. I still remember, trying to do my court paperwork with my laptop propped in the window of the women's shelter, trying to tap into someone else's internet at a neighboring house. It was just the most chaotic, horrible time in my life. And so it fluctuated. Depending on what was going on. He put my kids in a lot of really dangerous situations. They almost drowned in a pool on one time. So there were certain times they would give him supervised visits, and then they would just reinstate all of his time again, completely unsupervised. There was I used to describe it as walking in, and it's like they flip a coin and decide what happens to your kids that day.
Jesus.
And there would even be times I'd walk into court and I'd get to know my judge so well that I would be watching him preside and rule on other cases. And I would think, oh my God, he's in such a bad mood today. I don't want him ruling on my kids. And so I would ask for a continuance so we could come back on another day when he was in a better mood. It's a world that I don't wish on anyone. It's a very broken system.
Yeah. And how long did the entire process take for you?
Well, so going back, it was about 2 years into it when I just said, I felt like I was the only person in the world going through this. I didn't know that this issue existed anywhere else. There was nothing back then on the internet about narcissism. I started a blog called One Mom's Battle just as a way to help me process and navigate and make sense. And that kind of blew up. And I figured I discovered there were people all over the world going through these issues. And so my court battle was very intense from 2009 until 2014. And that's when the court finally said no more and protected my kids and said no more contact. It was in 2019 when we went back and terminated his parental rights, which is really hard to do in California. So,
and what was the grounds for that? Like what made the court decide that was something they were going to do? Because that is very difficult to get approved.
So he had no contact with them since 2014, and I was very strategic in not holding him accountable for child support. And so he was still on deck to pay child support, but he wasn't paying it, and he's, jet setting all over the world, still living this amazing life. And even on the weeks that I needed that money so badly, I never pushed it because I knew eventually that would be my leverage. And so his arrears balance grew to about $100,000.
Oh,
and finally, and it affected him. That was the kicker, is that they took his passport and he could no longer travel. And so we were able, with an attorney, we were able to say, listen, he hasn't seen the kids in years. We meet all of the criteria in the state of California to terminate parental rights. It has to be a year of no contact. Plus the arrears balance, I was able to say, I will forgive every penny of it if you agree to terminate parental rights. So we were able to do that, thankfully.
Unreal. And the no contact that he had for a year, was that court ordered, or he just hadn't contacted the kids?
That was court ordered. So in 2013, we went through a really intense child custody evaluation, which ended up lasting, I believe, about 8 months. And they go deep. They interview anybody and everybody. And the evaluator, I lucked out. He was an earth angel. And he really, really understood what I was up against. And he recommended professionally supervised visits permanently. And the narcissist ego can't handle that. And so he disappeared for over a year after that court order. And then when he tried to come back in my daughter's lives, it was and you'll love this one. After 15 months of not seeing my daughters, he wanted to come back and exercise his first supervised visit on my 40th birthday.
Of course he did.
Of course. But him re-entering their lives, we had finally had peace for 15 months, and they were doing so well, and it traumatized them. They wanted nothing to do with him.
And how old were they at the time?
6 and 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh God, that must have been so tough.
7 and 9, somewhere in there. And so I filed with the court again, and I just said, their therapists will go to bat for us. This has turned their lives upside down for him to just disappear and re-enter. And I remember that day in court, and the judge looked at us, and I had my script ready about, I want them to know their dad. I know the family court lingo at this point, but I want it to be a slow process for him to come back into their lives. We need to do it at their pace. And the judge looked at me and said, why are we letting this guy back in their lives at all? This guy's a sociopath. And I completely rewrote the script in my head, and I said, Your Honor, you're right. I don't know why we're pushing these little girls.
I mean, it's like finally the judge steps in and does his job. Okay, so the judge finally steps in. He terminates the parental rights. And when was it that everything with the brother-in-law started coming to light?
So my ex-husband's brother was one of the biggest parts of our entire custody battle. When my ex-husband and I were married, we had decided that his brother would never be around our kids. He
decided that with you?
Yeah. In fact, thank God, he had even put it in writing to his mom at one point during our marriage that we don't want our children around him at all. And so I had that to show we were in agreement on this, but true to narcissists and sociopaths, literally the week we separated, the first thing he did was take my daughters around his brother. Because again, he knew that was the way to hurt me. And my youngest daughter was 2 at the time, and she didn't even know that she had an uncle. We had completely sheltered them from him. And so that became one of the focal points of my entire battle, was trying to keep them away from him. And the court originally, it was very restricted. He could only see them 4 times a year. And I wasn't up against just my husband. It was literally his whole family. It was me against his family. And the court, over the years, his mom got involved. His mom would write declarations. She would meet with our custody evaluator. She would meet with minors counsel and talk about how wonderful her family was, how great this brother was. And it was just, you end up so desperate that you end up presenting like your unstable. I was just operating this fight or flight mode and trauma and desperation. And, so over time, the court just kept letting him have more and more access. And thankfully, to the brother.
Okay, so before we get into the detail, why don't you tell everybody who the brother is and why you needed to keep your girls away from him?
So when I first met this family, they presented as the all-American, parents had been married 30 years, 4 boys, Catholic family. They were both in education. They had started the local Catholic school. My husband was second in line in 4 boys, and his older brother was racist, homophobic, just a really unstable, scary person. He was a contractor, but he had graduated ASB president of the Catholic school. He was very well liked by a lot of people, super fun, party guy. Over the years, I just saw so many things that terrified me. So by the time we had kids, we made this decision that no, we'll keep him away from them. And their family is really well known in my area, used to be very liked. And so this was an ongoing issue, that was our fight. I had a reporter look at my case years ago and he said, this brother was the main focal point. I said, yeah, I know. I knew, he was worse than I ever imagined. 2 years after the courts ceased all contact between my ex-husband and my daughter. So it was 2014. 2 years after that, I got a call. I'm remarried. My husband called me one day and he said, "What is your ex-brother-in-law's middle name?" And I said, "Robert." "Why?" And he said, "Tina, he was just arrested for child molestation." I barely remember the rest of that day. I was unfortunately in public when I got that call. I had to sit down on a bench. I don't remember driving home. It was my worst nightmare. And to the point where when it was 100 degrees and I had to drop my kids off at their house, I put my kids in long pants. I was so worried. I didn't have any solid proof, any legal evidence, but I was so worried about members of their family that I did everything I could to protect my kids.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to take a quick break because I have some news. Okay, our Postmates bill has been seriously out of control lately, so Tay and I have been whipping up some Green Chef meals in the kitchen. Green Chef lets you choose from a wide array of easy-to-follow recipes perfect for keto, paleo, and plant-powered diets. Seriously, you guys, even I've been able to cook them. Green Chef is now owned by HelloFresh, so there's even more options to choose from. I switch back and forth between brands, and I'm excited that my discount can now get you all of it. It's made getting back to a healthier lifestyle easier with really delicious meals that fit perfectly into our routine. Go to greenchef.com/FML100 and use code FML100 to get $100 off, including free shipping. That's greenchef.com/FML100 and use code FML100 to get $100 off, including free shipping. Let me know what you guys are cooking up with the #1 meal kit for eating well. All right, let's get back to the show.
And so when I found out he had been arrested in the act of molesting a little girl by one of his neighbors, over the next month, it unfolded more and more to the point where he was labeled as the worst child predator in the history of San Luis Obispo County. He had so many child sex abuse images and videos that he had personally created, 4 terabytes, that our DA's office had to purchase new computer equipment to be able to take in that amount of data from the Department of Justice.
Unreal.
Yeah.
I mean, and here you are having to drop your kids off to this person's family's home.
His house, actually. And my husband lived with him.
Oh my God. And so did you bring that to the courts and bring that to their attention, that wasn't a safe environment for your kids? I mean, I can't imagine doing that.
I begged, pleaded, cried. I remember our first custody evaluator. She sat me down and told me, I'm going to let your daughters be around him for 4 holidays a year, as long as your husband, your ex-husband, and his mom are present. And I started crying. I had to get up and go to the bathroom. I came back about 5 minutes later and I said, what if I refuse to agree? What if I won't sign it? And she said, well, the way it works, if you don't sign this, it's going to go in front of the court with my recommendation. The judge is going to do whatever I recommend anyway. And then you're going to get a bill anywhere between $3,000 and $5,000. At the time, that's back when I was literally going to food pantries to feed my kids. $3,000 to me felt like the end of the world. And then to hear that the judge is going to order it anyway, I was basically forced to sign a paper saying that 4 days out of the year, they could be around him. And then minors counsel was appointed to investigate my allegations. Again, his name is very public. He just got convicted. His name's Jason Robert Porter. And minors counsel was literally appointed to investigate my concerns about this brother, did nothing. And after minors counsel was appointed, then it just became, I had to drop my kids off there every single visit. And
it just seems like there's no need for the uncle to be present. Like, I get the court ordering, they have to see the father.
Right.
But like, why the uncle who is being investigated for child abuse? That makes no sense to me.
Well, at the time he wasn't being investigated. His arrest didn't come until 2016. So a lot of it was my word against theirs.
Right.
I was telling the court, he travels to Thailand to have inappropriate relations with girls. He bought a bride from Thailand. He made out with a 14-year-old girl at a wedding as a 30-year-old man, and no one looked into it. No one would. They just kept forcing me to send my kids into this house. And then at one point, they even ordered that I had to drop my kids off there. So I'm having to drive 40 minutes north of my house and literally turn my little girls over to these people who are,
God.
Now, it's not the way any mom ever wants to be validated. I'll tell you that.
I mean, it's unreal. So did you have a conversation? I mean, I know your girls were so young at the time, but did you have a conversation with them about, about people not touching their bodies or people not being inappropriate with them? What was that like?
Literally every single drive up to their house, we talked about good touch, bad touch, about where your bathing suit areas are. I drilled it in my daughters. It became so important to me early on when I knew that the court system wasn't going to protect them, to empower my kids on their own, to know what red flags are in people, to know what boundaries are. I used to teach them that boundaries are emotional, they're psychological, they're physical, your heart has a boundary. And so empowering my kids to listen to their instincts and what red flags are, all of those things, it became trying to protect them from gaslighting. I used to do this game with them, and it was called I Know My Truth. And I would tell them, I love your red shirt. And they'll say, I know my truth. My shirt's green. And just constantly those things, because when you're, first of all, so desperate for the court, and then you realize pretty quickly how broken that is.
I can't imagine as a mother being forced to drive your babies into a dangerous situation like that.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
No, and it's so, I get a lot of comments like, I wouldn't have done it. I would have gone into hiding. That's not as easy as people think. And I get that.
Yeah.
And had I had unlimited funds or resources, I would have left and I would have disappeared. Right. But I also know a lot of moms through my advocacy work who have taken that path, and then you lose your babies completely when you get, because it's not a matter of if, it's when you're going to get caught. And then your children are now 100% in the hands of their abuser. And so, but all those things do go through your mind. And believe me, I thought all of those options out because you're in such a desperate place. And, I'll tell you, the past, as broken as the family court system is, I just went through the criminal justice system with this man, and it's been a 5-year journey. He was arrested in 2016. He was just convicted last week of 52 counts of child sexual abuse, pornography. He will never, the saving grace is he will never see the light of day. He'll never be eligible for parole. We estimate he's probably going to get between 300 and 700 years in prison because of how horrific his abuse was to these.
Yeah, I read what he was charged for and convicted of, and it's nauseating, to say the very least. And thank God.
Victims.
And thank God that they're getting some type of justice, because there's so many kids that go through things like this that don't. We had Kelly Randis on the show a couple months ago, who's the author of Spilled Milk, who went through child sexual abuse with her father. And the justice system is so broken for fighting for these victims that I'm happy, if nothing else, that this person finally got what he deserved.
Right.
What was it like for you when you got the call that they were making a decision on all of that?
So my husband is a saint. He has been attending. I went to the original hearings back in 2016, the preliminary hearings. It mentally, I consider myself to be a really resilient person. I truly ended up fetal position on my couch for 3 months after hearing the horrors of this case. And so my husband stepped in, and he has attended every single hearing for 5 years. It has consumed our lives in a lot of ways. The trial just finished, and my husband attended every day of that. He called me last week and basically said they just rested. They're going to have final arguments. And I wanted to be there. That was the part. I wanted to be there for final arguments for the verdict. Mm-hmm. And I was very, I've never been a part of a criminal case before. I didn't realize that final arguments meant that they were going to basically lay out the entire case, the Cliff Notes version.
Yeah, rehash everything.
It's the first time, one of the first times in my life where I've ever said, I feel like I disassociated. I feel like I was not in my body. As I was listening, I felt things were echoing. It was just the most bizarre feeling. And then being so close to this predator, this, person, one of the worst days of my life. Just the reality that, this is who I've been up against in this battle. This is who I fought to protect my kids from. This is the person that the family court system deemed safe for my babies to be under the same roof with. And, you go through so many emotions in a situation like that. And thankfully, on that day, the judge said, I want to think about this overnight. I want to review some more things, and we'll come back tomorrow for the verdict. And so we had that night. I left the court in such a fight or flight mode that I fell. I twisted my ankle. I'm a mess right now from it. Went back the next day. And again, just, you're waiting for them, the guilty. And it felt like it was it was probably only 10 minutes, but it felt like it was 2 hours. And when he started finally saying guilty, 52 different times, I just put my head down and sobbed.
Because the relief of that must have been so huge.
Huge. I'm still processing it and still not completely absorbed it all yet. I think a lot of my healing will come in my victim impact statement, which I'm working on right now for his sentencing. On June 28th, he will be sentenced, and we'll know,
unbelievable.
What price, he'll never. The one piece that I take with me is that he will never get out, and he's going to die in prison.
Yeah. Have you had any contact with your ex-husband since all this has happened?
Can I drop an F-bomb?
Oh, please. This is FML Talk. Drop away.
So I haven't had any contact with my ex-husband in years. And on the day I was leaving court, I unblocked him from my phone. I basically, fuck you, fuck your mom, fuck all of you sociopathic people who fought to put my kids in the clutches of a pedophile. Fuck you. And then I re-blocked him, so I will never know I don't care there's nothing he could ever say. I don't want it, but I'll tell you, it was cheaper than a copay with my therapist. And
and sometimes you just have to let the anger out, especially when it's so long running and so deep. You just have to give yourself that moment,
Yeah.
So how has this entire, what has been years and years of a fight for you, how has this changed what you're now doing in your life and how you're helping other people?
So in the middle of all of my battle and trying to protect my kids, I started writing books. I wrote my first book back in 2011. It's called Divorcing a Narcissist, One Mom's Battle. And I've gone on to write 5 books total. I wrote a children's book. I have this whole lemons to lemonade theme in life. And so
I love that.
So teaching kids, no matter what you go through, because I went through a lot of abuse and dysfunction as a child. And I feel like, we as a society, now we're talking about these things, and it's fantastic, because before it was, you felt, different, or, now we're all talking about these issues and it's important. So I've written books. I am shifting gears right now to start doing family court advocacy. And I want to get involved in legislative change and use my story to share that they need to believe survivors. I also started a coach certification program to teach other people to become family court advocates and help others navigate child custody battles with high conflict narcissists, sociopaths. And so I stay very busy. I often say I'm the accidental author and family court advocate. It's not a path you choose, but I believe my own story has purpose. And I've raised 2 amazing young ladies who are going to go out there and move mountains in their own ways.
I love that. Against all fucking odds and no help from, the ex-husband or the court system. What a journey you have had. Most people, they'll tell their story and there's certain shocking elements of it. I feel like from the moment you found out about the debt and the amount of debt up until last week when his brother was convicted, it's every step of the way has been an uphill jaw-dropping battle for you. what a fucking strong woman you are.
Thank you. No, and when I left court last week, somebody said, it's been 5 years coming. And I there was a part of me that wanted to scream, it's been 20 years coming. I have been fighting this family for half my life. And I'm exhausted. I look forward. I've coined this summer is going to be our summer of healing. And
love that.
We're done finally.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And it's time to bury what has taken up so much of your life. And at some point, do you think, because I want to bring this up because we did an episode a while back on forgiveness, and how it's so important because forgiveness is going to allow you to move through and be free. It's not about the other person being right or wrong. In this case, it's obviously they were so wrong. But do you ever think you'll be able to get to a point of where you can forgive enough to just let go and so that you can move through and heal?
So here's where I am with that, and what I share with people is that I have tremendous compassion for the 5-year-old boy that my ex-husband was, the 5-year-old boy that his brother was, because no one would choose these paths that they've taken. And healing or forgiveness is a hard word for me when it comes to them. Because, usually forgiveness involves someone saying, I've wronged you in some way. They're not capable of doing that. And so I have forgiven myself for the choices, for the red flags that I made or that I overlooked in the beginning that got me into this. And, when I talk to survivors, I hear a lot of guilt and shame in their voices, in their stories, because they beat themselves up for, what their kids have been through in the court system. And so I have 100% forgiven myself. And with them, it's compassion for who they once were.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful because I always say hurt people hurt people. So there was something that happened to them that made whoever's hurting you hurt so badly that they needed to make you hurt and take it out on you. So at the very least, we can try and have compassion for the fact that that was such a great hurdle for them to need to hurt someone else, and to let it go so that we can move forward with peace in our own lives, because it's about not letting our own energy be brought down. And I can't imagine having to, I get it. The word forgiveness with either of those men, especially the brother, is like not even in the same sentence. But I'm happy to hear that you're going to have your summer of healing and that you and your girls are finally safe and can breathe. And he's going to jail. The parental rights have been diminished, and like you can finally rebuild your family on a proper foundation that you all deserve.
Thank you. And I'm remarried to a wonderful man. They are out there, and that, it's
yes,
we're so lucky because it's I know when you've been through something like this, it can be scary to jump back in. So yeah, I try and tell people all the time, there is hope. Don't let all the narcissistic and, horrible stories that we hear diminish any of your hope, because they are out there and they are wonderful. And I think just hearing the story about your current husband and how he went and showed up to every hearing so that he could be there in a way that you couldn't be there for yourself is really beautiful. Yeah. Thank you.
And thank you for all the work that you are now doing with your books and your blog and helping other women, know that they're not alone and know that they have a place where they can get information and understand and learn about a lot of things that aren't taught until we hear them from other people sharing their stories. So can you tell everyone, again, the name of your book and where they can find your blog?
Absolutely. My books are all under the title of Divorcing a Narcissist. It's a whole series. They're on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. My blog is One Mom's Battle, and my coach training program is the High Conflict Divorce Coach Certification Program.
Amazing. I love that. And where can they find you on social media?
I am on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Our One Mom's Battle Facebook page has over 60,000 people on there, which tells what a big issue this is. And it's very much a community of survivors who are supporting each other in their custody issues.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that. Thank you so much, Tina, for being here. This has been such an incredible episode and hearing your story. I know this was very fresh for you because the conviction happened just last week. We actually rescheduled our podcast interview because of it. And I'm so happy that we did, because I would not have been able to sleep as well if I heard this whole story and didn't have that resolution of him, getting charged with what he deserves. So I'm glad that it ended up getting pushed for that specific reason.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me here today.
You're so welcome. It's been really wonderful. I want to thank Tina for not only coming on and sharing her story, the last, final completion of that and him finally getting convicted is so fresh. It went down a week before we recorded that. So I really am honored that she was able to come on and share her story and, speak on the fact that justice was finally served. And I'm just sending you all the love, girl. You deserve this fucking beautiful new beginning. You and your beautiful girls. I'm so, so happy for you. Okay, it is about that time. We are going to jump into your FML stories. Here we go.
Hey, Gabrielle. My name's Caitlin, and I'm from New York, and I'm here to tell my FML story. I found out about a month ago that the man I was dating for a year and a half was also dating 3 other women in Massachusetts at the same time. His name is Peter Mark Trask. I had been in an abusive relationship in the past, and prior to this knowledge, I thought this was the healthiest relationship I had ever been in. He was empathetic, charming, emotional. My family loved him. Everything a narcissist is before getting caught. When we first started dating, he told me his ex accused him of having child porn because she wanted him to stop working so much as a soccer coach. He said that she went to the extent of putting images on his computer, that he deleted them, and that charges were dropped. I believed him, and he told me he had documents he could show me, but I didn't think twice, as I had been in an abusive relationship myself. I trusted him. I trusted him so much that he told me he got a dream job in Massachusetts, that he would make more money so that we could start our lives together. I wanted to support him and encouraged him to go. It was his dream job. Why not? I got my license in social work in Massachusetts and started looking at apartments. Fast forward to a month ago, I noticed on social media that he had a page for Private Pins, the company that he worked for, and a girl liked all of his pictures and had nothing to do with the company. He followed her as well. I added the girl as I had a gut feeling that something was off. That evening, she called me from his phone. He was at her house, and we found out that he had been dating her for a year. We then found out about another girl he had been dating for 6 months, and then another one he dated when he and I first met. He moved to Massachusetts because she had moved to Massachusetts and never actually had the job that he said he had. He is a felon in New York State. He took money from one of the girls to get his name and articles off Google. He would re-gift everything we gave him, so now I have a lot of the girls' stuff at my house. He jumped from house to house, not paying for anything. Come to find out, the child porn stuff is true. Us girls are now in a group chat and support one another completely. These girls understand me better than some friends I've had my whole life. So just a heads up, ladies, the other women are not meant to be hated. Come together and support one another and empower one another. We have to stick together.
Damn, girl. I think this is the first FML story where someone was just like, first, middle, last name. Thank you very much. So, Peter, man, every female listening to this podcast, put a fucking red flag up for that name. That is wild. To move an entire state and uproot your life to find out that he doesn't even have the fucking job. He was moving there for a female. And I fucking love that you guys are now in a group chat together. Big ups to you guys, women supporting women, because it's never somebody's fucking fault when they get blindsided and have no idea. That responsibility falls on the douchey fucking man on the other end of it, or woman if it's that flipped of a situation. More power to you, girl. Thank you for submitting that. Next week, you guys, it's been a little while since we've given you an episode that had a little bit of tea in it. And this is more like the whole fucking kettle. Casey Campbell from Temptation Island is coming on to not only share about her narcissistic ex that famously dumped her on national television, and I mean, not even dumped her, cheated on her, was just the worst of the fucking worst to witness while I was sitting there at my TV with my mouth open. But interestingly enough, that gem of a human happens to be Daniel's best friend. So we are taking you back to Dramaland for a little bit, and I promise you it is a fucking doozy. As always, make sure you guys are subscribed so you never miss an episode. Keep up with us on Instagram at FML Talk Podcast. If you are not hanging out with us in the private Facebook group or getting all of the uncut bonus episodes, you can do that at patreon.com/FML Talk. And until next week, I love you guys so much. Have a self-love cocktail on me. Cheers.